Welcome to episode 20 on Queer Link. My name is Ree, and today's guest is Richard Clark. Thank you for being here today. Tell the people a little about yourself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Richard Clark, also known as, maybe better known as, Titsessence on social media. Yeah, I'm a Black Genderfluid Trans Femme person who is originally from a super small, awful town in California, but now I live in Brooklyn, Bushwick, and I'm currently in a PhD program at the Grad Center. And I also teach at City College, though everything's virtual now. So it's all done at my house.
The first time you left home, you went to Santa Cruz for university, and you mentioned that this was kind of the first place you were learning about queer identities, learning about terminology, kind of building your community. How was that experience for you?
Yeah. So moving from my super rural hometown, and not to say I didn't know anything about queer identity there, but in moving to Santa Cruz, it was just the floodgates were kind of open to queerness, and I was really allowed to see just how expansive and, there were no rules, in so to speak, in terms of gender and sexuality, and thinking about all of the sort of confines that I was in were due to just sort of societal and familial and religious upbringings. And I was just like, wow, I can really just let these go and actually step into all of these areas of myself and myself in relation to other people that I wasn't able to sort of step into before. So yeah, it just really opened my world a bit. I remember just immediately kind of diving into the queer community of Santa Cruz in any way that I could. So I think I joined first the queer student union, and then they had queer events, and then by then you have you're connected to these various queer circles, and there's orgies, and it's fun, and it's yeah, and it just really a network of people all doing sort of different facets of things, different majors. But yeah, that's kind of how Santa Cruz was, and then just allowed me to comfortably and at my own pace. I think a thing about Santa Cruz that's often looked over is it's kind of a slow paced place, or not even a slow pace. It's just chill. And I hate using that word to describe a place, but it's very much figure out yourself on your own time, and if you change from one moment to the next, your identities will be fine with that. Or how you identify or what you wear, people are just very open to it, at least in the queer community. You can't include the straights in, or the cishets in these things sometimes because they fall short. But yeah, Santa Cruz was a really amazing place for that because there were just so many queer folk there. So queerness was fine. Race stuff, not so much, but that was dealt with accordingly.
And I remember you mentioned the first month there, you kind of went to go buy your first pair of heels. How was that experience, and just being kind of a gender fluid person on campus at that time?
Yeah, so I remember just always wanting a pair of heels, and I wanted tall ones. I wanted platform stilettos. So I was I need these, and I found them on the internet. I was okay, I don't know my size in women's shoes, but I guess do the little size conversion.
Did you go with someone, or was this kind of thing you did by yourself?
Oh, I did it by myself because I was in the dorms then, and I ordered them from Just Fab, I think, way back. So I ordered them, and I had to, because I was living with two straight men. in the dorm. I was like, no thanks. So I went to my friend's room to like try them on, and then I was like, wait a minute, the confidence is here. So
Yes.
yeah, I found these, and I got them originally for what event? I think it was queer prom, and I was being like a cage dancer at queer prom, and I wanted to be in my little stiletto heels. So fun. Such a good idea.
And is that where you kind of found your love for academia?
So I don't know that I would say that I have a love for
Mm,
academia, but I do have a love for, I guess, like scholarship and knowledge and learning
mm,
and kind of being in spaces that are for that.
mhm,
That are like, here is your chance to like really dive into theory, really think critically about the world and your place in it, and knowledge and how it's produced and who is producing it and what that means. And academia is just like all of that. But I'm not, I don't believe that it's the best place for that because it has a lot of problems. So like I love when I can do that like with my community more so than when I do it in academia.
and do you like when you think back on your time in Santa Cruz there when you were just kind of figuring it out, was there like a conversation that like really sparks just like your interest in just finding yourself, or like a conversation that maybe really clicked and you're like, oh my God, like that's me, or like I can kind of relate to that?
Yeah, because I can think about conversations maybe more so my junior and senior
Okay.
year, that were just like really helped solidify things for me. I had one conversation just at a bar, just we were just like, okay, well, we're done dancing for a little bit. So like let's just sit down and talk about gender with my friend Ari. And in this conversation, because Ari, Black non-binary trans mask person,
Mm,
me Black non-binary trans femme. So we were both just kind of like really contending with not only like our own sort of hesitations or understandings of gender, like is this what I'm giving, is this what I like, who I am, who I want to be, but also very much the societal like danger and violence and pressure. And it's just like when you're talking to community
mhm,
or folks who share similar parts of themselves,
mhm.
that base level of understanding is already there, so you can like get to these really juicy conversations. So yeah, that conversation with Ari where we were just like, so like this is what I'm feeling about my gender, but I just don't know, because like if I do this, if I take this route, these are the kinds of things that I could experience. But then also recognizing like as Black queer people already, we're experiencing loads of violence. So just recognizing that we were like, okay, so like fear isn't our option anymore. And like, fear was not what we, recognizing that when we give in to the fear of violence, that we are in turn sort of enacting violence on ourselves just by being and hiding. So it was just like one of those beautiful, like quick, well, maybe not quick. I don't know how long the conversation was, but that's one that sticks out to me. And then also I had many conversations with my roommate D, and we would just like, well, one, we would sing a lot of songs, which is like I can't sing it all, but it was very fun. Um, and then just like randomly just engage with like different forms of like sort of queer understanding, gender understanding.
Mhm.
So those sort of conversations stick out to me.
And I'm just curious, when did you kind of learn about the term gender fluid and you were just like, oh, that's kind of me? Was that later?
Um, yeah, so I feel like I knew about the term gender fluid for a minute,
Mhm,
like maybe like my sophomore year, but I think it was really my like, so before then, like I think from my end of freshman to end of junior year, I was like definitely not gender conforming, but I would still kind of in certain spaces be like, yes, like that is, I am a conforming gender person. And then it didn't help that I had an abusive partner that was just like, you are a man. But after that, just kind of coming out of that relationship, I was like, wait a minute, like all of these hindrances again that I placed on myself, for what? For what? So then I like really sort of sat in the term gender fluid, and it just felt like comfortable. It felt correct. It felt healthy. So yeah, that is how I found it. I think my senior year, or like not how I found it, but how I settled into it, so to speak.
I think there's something amazing just about when like a label or identity just clicks and you're just like, you have that like realization with yourself.
Mhm.
I just think that's just like such an incredible feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And as much as I'm like, I wish it was less about just kind of like, let's categorize. I wish it was more about like, like let's try to understand from just like a base level of like, we're holding the complexity of you and you can be whoever, whatever.
Mhm.
But what I do also very much love when you're like, okay, so if there's not a word, let's make one up. If there, is a word out there, you find that language, and finding the language that
Mhm.
speaks to something that you've felt your whole life is amazing, which is another reason I think I'm in academia, is because it helps me find new language and new ways to talk about things that my very heady Capricorn ass needs sometimes.
And in 2007, you moved to New York City, where you are right now. So how was kind of shifting from Santa Cruz to New York City, and then just, you know, finding yourself in the academia world in New York?
It was such a shift because it was weird because a lot of my life, random friends or like family members or people would be like, I could really see you in New York. And I was like, that's weird. You don't know me. But anyway, so I, applied to this program because of the program itself, not really because of New York, but I was like, I do know that I want to go to New York at some point. And then moving here, the shift was just so surprisingly easy, so surprisingly like fitting
Mhm.
when I'm thinking about kind of the pace of things, the fact that I don't drive, and just like the community of particularly like thinking about the broader queer community, but thinking about like the Black queer community here in especially Brooklyn was just so liberating, dare I say, to find. So being able to share spaces with people in that way, and I made sure to move here at least a couple of months before I had to start my grad program, because I was like, I need friends and I need chosen fam outside of academia so that I don't do that. But yeah, and then shifting into academia here has been a ride, because I don't think I fully understood the kind of power you have as a PhD student in academia, but also the more aggressive the kind of power dynamics are
Mhm.
between like professors and PhD students. Because like in undergrad, I feel like they have a shit ton of students, at least in my experience, and they aren't as threatened, maybe is the word, by them. But in the shift to this PhD and being in New York, where it's like more fast paced, and I don't want to say people have bigger egos here, but like they're definitely strong. They're stronger egos. Has been weird. It's been a weird sort of navigation of academia and like definitely learning and playing the sort of game, but always, I think between my first and second year, I was like, I came in
Mhm.
kind of a slightly, I would say, watered down version of who you see before you now.
Mhm.
And then I think I was just like not feeling great. And I was like, I wonder why. And it was again because I was giving into that like
Mhm.
sort of giving people what they wanted, sort of watering down myself or like hiding parts of myself or using parts while pushing others to the side. And I was like, okay, we can't do this anymore. So
Mhm.
then just really coming back my second year being like, no thanks. Like I'm fully myself and going to stand in that in academia. And I think since I've done that, people have they try less to take advantage of me, but then it also, you know, has of course caused some rifts between me and folks who may have been able to like help me down the line,
Mm.
whatever.
Did you find that when you kind of came back more into yourself in the academia world, did you find a pushback at all with professors or students?
Yeah, yeah. Well, so students are interesting because
Hmm.
there's so many. Um,
Were
and
there
it's
a lot in your program?
there's not a lot in my program, but I
Mhm.
think in the grad center entirely. Like when because yeah, so just kind of coming back, I definitely felt more pushback against, or like kind of weird, maybe not even pushback, it's like weird, just general weird vibes from sort of certain faculty members or people who feel the need to like comment or, you know,
Yeah.
or like when I like I've had a couple of classes just like with professors who were just like just doing a lot of like really problematic things in regards to like seeing me and my ideas and my thoughts as valid and intelligent and worthy of being in the academy. I was telling you earlier about that professor
Mhm.
who, when we had our final presentation, we had to put pictures of ourselves. And my partner put like, you know, a photo of herself in her cap and gown from like undergrad. I was like, cute, cute. And I put a picture of myself and I was like at this gala. So I looked like I had my makeup on. I was very cute, but I was like, you know, it was like a not scandalous. It was just like a pantsuit or something, whatever I was wearing. And the professor proceeded to say, he was like, so one of these people says, like, I take my education seriously. The other says, I just look good in this outfit. And the rage that I had to kind of like hold on to. And instead, I was just like, well, holding complexity is something that this class did poorly. And that's something we'll talk about in this presentation. Click and on to the next. So it was just like navigating things like that
Of course.
that is indicative of like a larger problem within people. It's like they don't recognize the kind of shit that they're kind of constantly saying or the way that they're constantly invalidating somebody.
Mhm.
At least some of them don't. I know many of them do. And it's just like, it's exhausting and it's weird in academia because you have to respond to it. Like, I can't fight him. I want to,
Yeah.
but you can't just like yell and, you know,
Mm.
if in my ideal world, people would just fight. But
And right now, I know you were saying that you teach, and I know that you're still in school, but I feel like having those experiences and kind of just knowing, just from your point of view, what has like really helped you from learning from a teacher. Has like students come up to you, or I bet it's like pretty rewarding for them to just have someone like you in their presence, especially I know what a difference it would make having a queer or someone you could kind of look up to in a sense. How has that experience been?
yeah, that has been my favorite part of just being in
Mm.
academia. I came into being so an adjunct professor. I was unaware, because I had these ideas. I was like, okay, so there must be a lot of boundaries and rules and like power that keeps professors from, you know, caring for their students and keeps professors like trying to gaslight their students. And I was like, all these things must be like institutional. But then, you know, becoming a professor myself and realizing that those aren't real, and then just being able to create a very sort of freeing space in which, you know, I I come as my full self and I share and I'm honest, and I use a pedagogy tool called Radical Honesty by Bianca C. Williams. And just like being able to be open, vulnerable, full, but also critical and engaged with the material, and asking folks to do the same if they want to, has created very different spaces than I have been in academia. And I think especially for students. So yes, when they when they comment on it, so I ask for feedback a lot because I'm like, I can always make this better. I can always be better. But yeah, having students like come up to me and being like, I've never had a professor that cared about me, which is like, and it's like all of these things that seem like what an educator should do. You know, it's like care about me, or like, you know, give us more time, or like recognize that we're in a pandemic. Is like, they all seem very basic things, but it's indicative that academia doesn't want professors to do that.
Yeah.
But in my resistance of that, I think folks are really grateful of it. It makes me very emotional when they say it at the end of class. So I feel like at the last classes every semester, I'm always just tearing up because I don't know, it just means a lot to, especially to me, because I've had so many hard experiences in just school, in being in school as myself, like since first grade. So trying to reimagine and recreate, and actually recreating a space for learning and knowledge that's not kind of perpetuating cycles of violence against especially queer and BIPOC folk, but you know, any person, one that's recognizing the way that power works and privilege and oppression sort of manifest in a classroom.
Well, I know we all really appreciate you, and you're doing a great job just holding that space. How has it been navigating this during just the COVID times of just, you know, in class versus Zoom?
Yeah, that was a shift. The COVID times were a shift. So I've always been super tech savvy. So like my classes were, they were easily moved online, like logistically speaking, not much had to change. But I think the hard part is like, I don't know if I can help build the same kind of like community in the same way that we did before. Because before in class, you know, I could be like, break up into these groups, and then they're like, you know, having these sort of like intimate conversations in smaller groups with one another, that the crosstalk can happen, and then just like all of that really beautiful sort of collaborative knowledge building. But in Zoom, you can't do that. In Zoom, you can do breakout rooms, but then it's just like an insular breakout room, and like people, and I don't want to like force people to sort of have to engage in that way, because I have like a specific anecdote that I have is the shift from Zoom. One of my students, when we were in class, was just always very vocal, very, you know, present, very engaged, and was like, like it felt trying to be over Zoom. But then there was one moment while like she was giving her final presentation where she was like talking and like in her normal, like very, you know, Harlem voice, very fun. And then like a parent or something came in and her voice went up like 3 octaves. And I was just like, it's not my business, but like, it's recognizing that when people are in certain spaces, like when I can't like physically create a space that's safer or that's, you know, braver, that people are in their homes, and in their homes might not be the safest place for them to be free. I know it wasn't for, you know, me growing up always. So.
And just touching upon family, how has it been just navigating the support from your family versus, you know, chosen family support, and just kind of making sure you have the love and respect?
Yeah. So I love my mom, my biological mom. And she has always been a really supportive person. I think for a long time though, her struggling like with my brother kind of being a little wild and then my dad being literal trash, I felt the need to like care for her, not in a way that like I need like a parent, but in a way that it's like, I don't want to make your life any harder than it is. So I hid a lot from her. And in doing that, you know, allowed me in my hometown isolation. Like I was just completely isolated, which was rough. But then moving to undergrad, finding chosen fam that I still, you know, am in contact with, even though we're all over the place. Though I guess everybody's moving to Portland now, so whatever.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, finding people and support networks has been like absolutely life-saving for me. And I think all it really, well, not all it takes, but it takes time, and it's been challenging here in New York more so than it was, I think, in a slower place like Santa Cruz. Like, and it's I things are, there's more going on here, generally speaking. So like finding that care network here, it took some time, but I definitely have found people that genuinely care for and respect and support me, and vice versa, particularly. And thankfully, so one person I'm thinking of right now is, I think in the New York context, is my friend Chi, who we are in the same grad program. She is 1 year above me.
Okay.
And we just like immediately clicked. And I don't think either of us knew that we would become as close as we are now, but now we're like truly a bonded pair, very much like going through our healing journeys together, supporting one another, and also some other folks. I mean, I'm sure I could shout them all out, but maybe not. But then thinking like my undergrad support people, mixing with my New York support people and my partner who I live with now. I have a very strong network of care and support that I don't lean on as much as I should as a person I am, but I recognize that. I just recently got a reading that told me that. And I was like, you're not wrong, but you're loud. But you're so loud.
And how has it been just being in a relationship and just having all of that love and support right now, and just kind of, you know, learning about each other and learning about healthy boundaries?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, being in this relationship is wild to me because, well, one, it's the longest I've ever had, but it's also the only, I want to say, relationship that I have been in that just to its core feels healthy, and also like one in which I feel very seen and validated, and it really means a lot for me. So that is beautiful. With my current partner, we have a dog now. But yeah, it's wild. Navigating boundaries has been a little more challenging as of late, only because I'm working with like a lot of bodily healing stuff, and I have a lot of bodily trauma, and it's coming up, and I'm like, there needs to be new boundaries. But I think in the beginning, we're both earth signs, so we didn't want to admit that we had strong feelings for each other for a minute. But then, you know, of course, there was like an event that made us both realize that we had kind of feelings. And this is very emblematic. I think initially I was like, oh, okay, so the event happened. Let's, you know, I'm gonna like, we're done, right? Like that's the end of this, great. But then having the chance to just like sit down and we had a conversation about like boundaries and talk like what we needed and what we were like thinking about one another, which turned in, and I think set the tone for just kind of the rest of our relationship, where we're able to talk about, you know, boundaries and needs and like sensations even, and like what kinds of things that we are expecting or just wanting from one another, that in very beautiful and complex ways. And so we have some just very sort of easy ground rules. And then, you know, we have kind of more intimate between the two of us, like boundaries. So that, I think, setup has been beautiful, especially because we're polyam. Though different now, I guess, in the context of COVID as well.
How's that been?
It's been good. Well, so for me, I haven't really done much of anything outside of the two of us, but also because I'm moving through it constantly, and I'm like, I just don't have the time. Of course. But yeah, it's been good. It's been really nice because I am someone who, I'm not a super jealous person. I just genuinely feel excited and happy when he's excited and happy about somebody. But oftentimes he's kind of like conflicted, so that like I don't feel conflicted about it, but it's like, okay, so what is happening? And, like, and I was like, and without comparing anybody to me because I'm perfect, what is happening? But yeah, it's just it's fun. I don't know. We navigate it very well. And I think it's important to sort of have those kind of regular conversations about boundaries, especially around like, and knowing your own boundaries and what it means to sort of hold firm to them, knowing that your boundaries are there to care for you. And oftentimes they can change as you grow and as you heal, or as you kind of like develop a deeper sense of trust in, you know, your relationship and your partner. It's like, oh, well, this doesn't bother me anymore. Yeah. And I think that was something that has kind of happened throughout the relationship, is like in the beginning, I wouldn't say things bothered me, but I was definitely like, I'm an avoidant. I was an avoidant attachment style, very much like, well, you know, we don't have to do this, like very much, not like ever directly like that. Like it was just like, if you don't want me, that's okay. And just like that kind of avoidance, or like, why aren't we arguing? I don't understand. Yeah. Kinds of things like, is this even love if we're not? And it's just like, we can think about where that comes from, but also just recognizing that no, like, why should there have to be like tumultuousness in a relationship for it to be real, for it to be sustainable and deeply fulfilling? And then I think in recognizing that, I was like, oh, I can let go of a lot of bullshit that I held on to. And we've had conversations about that. He was like, so I have like really moved past like so many of these things.
You know, you touched upon something. You said that like, it's interesting because we weren't really fighting. So we kind of were just like, what's going on? It's interesting how when you're with someone, I think I just had this conversation the other day with my partner. We're just like, we haven't fought that much in the past 2 years, but we're just like kind of double checking and like making sure like, it's kind of weird how like that now is kind of, it's like kind of normalized in a sense.
Mhm.
I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Just thinking about how and it's every narrative, like you have to fight with your partner for it to be, you know,
Mm-hmm.
passionate, for it to be real. And I think about just all those romantic narratives and then the
Mm-hmm.
romantic relationships I've been in, and I'm like, there's a reason none of them worked out. Like,
Exactly. And I know you mentioned to me earlier that you've been doing a lot of healing work, and how has that just been during this time of COVID?
yeah, so it has been a process. So luckily I really jumped into sort of healing my mental, psychological, spiritual wounds early on, or like in undergrad, with sort of a combination of like dream work and care and conversations and things like that.
If people don't know what the dream work is, you want to specify
Oh,
that?
sure. Yeah. So dream work is sort of taking your, the dreams that we have when we're sleeping seriously, recognizing that they not only help you sort of deal with your own sort of experiences and understanding your sort of existence in connection to the world and others, but also contain within them those sort of intergenerational messages. I definitely connect to my ancestors in my dreams, and thinking about healing that in those deeper wounds that I don't generally have access to in my waking life. I know many people do, but
Mm.
for me, it's a little harder. So dream work is the process of just taking dreams seriously, writing them down if you need to, but then learning from them by moving through them and thinking about the themes. And it takes a very deep understanding of sort of your current self in the world. And I think that so they kind of help with each other. They like, I learn more about myself so that I can do better at dream work, and I do better at dream work because I learn more about myself. So it's a nice symbiotic reciprocal relationship between the two. So yes, that's what dream work is. And I learned kind of a combination of just like listening to my grandma talk about her dreams, and like very much like engaging in dreamer, but I don't know if she called it that. But then finding kind of different avenues to explore, and it's helped me a lot. But yeah, my current place has led me in a different way, because, and I told you this when we were chatting earlier, that I have never really taken the best care or held my body in the highest regard, like physically, my physical form, because for most of my life, I was just like, well, like, I'm not going to be here long based on who I am. And based on the way this mental health is set up, I don't know how long I will be alive. But I did make a deal with myself. I think I was maybe 13, maybe 12, where I was like, if I make it to 27, I will. And I think then it was just like something about fully support myself. Because at the time I was like, I can do this to care for me, I can do this to care for me, but I like, my body is the last thing that I care about. So I'm 27 now, this year, in the midst of a pandemic, and I'm doing very difficult work around sort of a lot of, and it's not just like pain and trauma trapped in my body. I trapped a lot of joy in there too, that it's like coming up, and I'm like, why didn't I let myself be happy about this? Why didn't I, allow this kind of confusion to move through, a natural process? So there's like a lot inside of my body that I'm just kind of like working with, which is, as I was talking about boundaries earlier, it's creating a whole new kind of series of like, I need this in this moment, but it won't, it's temporary. And it's like, let's talk about this. So the process has been wild, especially in sort of times of COVID, because I'm already hyper body aware being outside. And then I think just like a pandemic adds new layers to like being outside, being visible, and just like engaging with my body and other people engaging with my body and projecting onto it. So it's very tender right now, trying not to internalize or like hold anything else within, hold any new experiences until I kind of extrapolate some of the old ones. But that's not possible, obviously.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. I think
Yeah.
it's important just to hear how other people kind of go through just mental health in itself, and especially with your, just like you said, just with COVID and just other sources coming to play, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it has been really interesting, not because, you know, going outside so much less. I don't get as much harassment. So I have just been generally, like, I think baseline happier, and I didn't recognize how much the sort of constant harassment was weighing on me until I didn't have to deal with it anymore.
Wow.
And then I think about, must be nice to live in a world where you're not harassed on the street.
Yeah.
I would have so much more time.
Well, thank you, Richard, so much for being on Queer Link today and sharing with us your stories. If you enjoyed this video, please give us a like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you.
Thank you so much.